Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here, coming at you from the Knife Center, and welcome to Knife AQ, episode number 97, the knife series where I answer all your questions, whether they're sharp or dull. And this week, one of the big topics we're looking at is what are some good cheap knives that you can use to stash anywhere you might need it. Let's check it out. All right, if you're new to this series, the deal is we answer your questions, whether they're sharp or dull. But to get your questions to us, what you have to do is leave them in the comments section below this video. We'll go through and pick a few of them out for inclusion in a future episode. This week, the first thing we're talking about is actually not a question, but it is you folks answering my question from last week's episode, sharing your stupid knife stories, things you've done dumb with knives. And there were a lot of good ones, But this one in particular stood out to me. So this comes from Cat Eakins. He says, I had a Buck 110. I was using it to open boxes. It was well used, and I could pull it out of my pocket, pull it open, toss it in the air, and catch it all one-handed. I think we see exactly where this is going. One day I threw it too high, missed the catch enough to get it to go point down and had it land in my leg. I still don't know how I did it. I know exactly how you did it. One-handed, you pulled it open, opened it, tossed it in the air, and tried to catch it.
With your leg.
You caught it really well with your leg. Wow. Man.
Do not attempt.
Mr. Cat Eakins, or Miss. Actually, that looks like a female in the little, what's the word? Profile picture. Good job. Well done. Thank you for sharing. Do not try that at home, anyone out there. All right, let's get to the first actual question for today, which comes from DJ Fugi. I've been wanting to stock up on folding knives to keep in our various bags, medkits, vehicles, etc., so that we always have one handy. If you had to pick one knife to buy 5 to 10 of for this purpose, which would you go with in the $30 to $50 range? I prefer flippers, but it's not a hard stop either way. I have some experience with Civivi knives and really like them for the price range. The Badlands Vagabond caught my eye, but I'm open to being persuaded otherwise. What would you suggest for something that would not often see heavy use, but would be ready for action if needed? Not looking for self-defense, just camping/survival purposes. Okay. You asked specifically if I had to pick one, what would I pick? And I've actually done this myself. And the answer for me was the Buck 110. Not the classic version right here, but the Slim Select version. Actually, I've got the 112 here as an example because we didn't have the 110 on the shelf today. Comes in around the $30 mark, and it's made in America. I like that it's the local production, local in the grand scheme of things for me here at that kind of price. They're reliable. It's a classic design. They're slimmer, easier to stash somewhere, easier to carry if I needed to throw it in a pocket. I have a handful of these, maybe only about 2 or 3. It's hard to remember these things sometimes. I've stashed them in glove boxes, tool boxes, etc. I think they're a great choice. It's not a flipper, but it has a lot of good things going for it. But you threw in at the end there camping/survival purposes. And for me, it might be nice to have a slightly thicker handle than something like this. So for that reason, you could look at the Buck 110 LT. That might be what I would do as an alternative. Again, since you asked what I would personally pick. Very nice knife right here, $29.95, so it's a $30 knife. Same profile as the classic 110 and the same thicker handles. No pocket clip. It does come with a belt pouch, but solid, affordable knife with a good grip. But let's get on to some other options as well, because you said you liked flippers and the Badlands Vagabond in particular. I think this is a great knife. It is one of my favorite budget-oriented knives. It's about $40. The fit and finish is great. The flipping action is great. The blades are nice and thin. The edges are nice and sharp. It's a great knife, but for me, this is not really a camping/survival thing. Now, the reason I wouldn't go for this for a this type of purpose along with a camping survival thing is a couple reasons. One, for the camping survival thing, you're going to be, potentially getting dirt or be involved in cutting around less than clean conditions. And as such, the ball bearings in the pivot here might not be something I'd want to worry about. Furthermore, if these are stashed in kits most of the time, I want something to be as worry-free, maintenance-free as possible while it's primarily sitting there. And lint could, of course, get stuck up in that pivot as well, making it less optimal. Which is unfortunate because there's a lot of fantastic flippers under the $50 mark, but most of them use ball bearings, and a lot of them come with D2 tool steel as well, which is good stuff, but it's only kind of semi-stainless. So again, if it's long-term storage in a kit, I might go for opt for something a bit more stainless. So affordable, $30 to $50, or potentially even less, but under $50 flippers with washers. Steel Will is kind of my go-to brand for that sort of thing, because as you can see with this Modus right here, that flipping action is phenomenal. Couple problems with this in particular. One, the D2 steel, like I mentioned, which is fine if you want to go with something like that. But again, I might opt for a stainless for this scenario. Also a little bit thinner, and these are getting a little more expensive. This is about 47 bucks right now, and this is one of the last full-size knives they offer under that $50 mark now. You can still get some of the minis. So this is not quite it either, but could be a good choice. Which leaves me with kind of one recommendation that I'm really happy with for your needs. It's the Cold Steel Crawford 1. It's about 40 bucks. You got a 3.5-inch blade of 4116 stainless, so you don't have to worry about rust so much. And it is a washer-based flipper. No ball bearings in the pivot there, so easier to keep clean, easier to keep grit out of it. Doesn't flip as nicely as the steel will, but it flips just fine, as you can see. And I know you mentioned you weren't looking for self-defense, and this obviously looks a bit tactical, but it's just a very versatile clip point blade shape, regardless of whether it has the extra shove-off bits for a tactical knife. And it's a little bit girthier in the hand, so it could stand up to some heavier grips without being too bulky either. Really good choice. It's got a liner lock. It's got the double safe lock here. They have a name for this, I think, but I can't remember what it is in particular, but it is a secondary switch that essentially prevents the liner lock from disengaging. So you have double retention right there, a double or dual locking mechanisms. Pretty good option and relatively affordable too at that $40 mark, right in the middle of the price range you were looking into. So that's my flipper recommendation. But if we're talking about this genre of inexpensive knives that are cheap enough you could throw in a bunch of kits but aren't built cheaply, so you can rely on them in, stressier situations, there's two knives in particular that we have to talk about. One is the Ontario Rat 1. Classic for this type of use, and about 34 bucks for this orange one right here. 3.6 inches, AUS 8 blade steel. You can get D2 for a bit more money, but again, I like stainless for this application. The orange could be nice for visibility, but you've got other colors. You've also got plenty of length and girth on the handle for some heavier grips, but you've still got a very slicey blade going on. Full steel liners, non-skeletonized. You've got strength, you've got the liner lock. Just the reputation of these, especially at the price, is pretty much unimpeachable. Hard to go wrong with a knife like this. The other one is another cold steel. It is the Pocket Bushman, also about a $33 knife. You've got 4116 steel again, 4.5 inches on the blade here, and a folded steel handle. It's a single piece, so it's kind of like an integral, so to speak. Not the most comfortable in the hand, at least here where your fingers wrap around, but in a kit like this, it's always a good idea to have a pair of work gloves anyway. That can mitigate that a little bit. But the reason it still deserves mention, even without a pair of gloves, is just the strength here. We have an Andrew Demko designed ram lock here. It's a two-hand operation. This is not a fidgety knife for sure, but you grab this lanyard on the end, pull back, and then you can push closed the blade. And just the way this engages with the tang of the knife has been well shown to just be super, super strong. Kind of one of those just ultra durable knives that have a reputation for being way more of a reliable tool than its low price would suggest. So check that out. It's kind of the polar opposite of a flipper, however, in terms of its quickness, so to speak. Just be clear-eyed going in, but had to mention that. Another thing, have you thought about a fixed blade? Because it's hard not to recommend a Mura knife for a situation like this. The basics can be had for around $10, companions for less than 20 most of the time, or even something like the companion Spark. Since you're talking about a survival kit, you can get a great knife design right here with a ferro rod there in the butt of it, just in case you need some fire starting capabilities as well. Since you're talking, again, you mentioned camping survival specifically. Really nice thing. Like I said, even if you go with like the sub $20 companions, they're lightweight. They don't take up a ton of space. You can slip it right there in the sheath. The sheath doesn't add a ton of bulk. Very easy to stash in kits all over the place and very, very economical in addition to performing quite well. All right, next question comes from Boom Shakabaka, who says, my question is regards to using your knife fixed or folder to throw sparks off a ferro rod. I know you want a carbon blade like 1095 or something similar, but will it work if your blade is coated? If any, which coatings would work? All right, before we get to the coatings part of that, I want to address the first part of your assertion in that you want a carbon steel for use with a ferro rod, and that's actually not true. For instance, this Mora that we just showed, the companion Spark with its ferro rod, also called a fire steel here in the spine, they have designed this knife so that the spine of it is crisp enough to throw sparks off of this ferro rod. And as you can see right here, it is a stainless blade. All you really need to make a ferro rod work is a crisp edge, a crisp, hard edge, I should mention. Something that's really low Rockwell or an unheat treated blade is not going to do the trick. It's got to be hard. Technically, you could even, I've seen someone do this, although I don't recommend it, a shard of glass will even work because it's hard and crisp. The reason, or where the confusion comes in is this thing right here is sometimes mistakenly called a flint, whereas this is not flint, this is ferrocerium. Naturally occurring flint, yes, you will need a carbon steel, 1095, 1075, any of the 10 series stuff really, as long as it's hard enough. 01 works pretty well, A2 sometimes, I've seen it done, but it's a little less reliable, shall we say. So a true natural flint, yeah, you want something like that. But a ferro rod, all you need is a crisp edge. And coatings will work as long as it's a coating that does not round over the edge. For example, this Tops Fieldcraft 3.5 here. Fantastic knife, but it has a kind of a powder coating or a traction coating. So even if the spine of the blade was crisp before they coated it, the blade or the coating is going to round off that corner and make it not quite crisp enough to do the job. You could certainly come in and scrape that coating off and you might be able to get to that edge, then it will work. But as is, coatings like that won't do so great. But something like on this Mora Garberg here that has a blackened finish, I believe it's a DLC, still has a crisp edge on it. So that still will work. But best bet is if you're looking to use it with a ferro rod, stick with an uncoated blade, or keep in mind that you may have to go in and modify the spine either with a stone, or you can go a little more fun with like a grinder or something if you want to get aggressive. Even a Dremel can work in a pinch. But if you want to use naturally occurring flint, stick with the carbon steels. Otherwise, steel in this case doesn't matter. In many cases, steel doesn't always matter, as much as we like to make it, or like to think it does, but hope that helps. Next question's from Johan. Hi, DCA and Thomas. Say hi, Thomas.
So,
I'm trying to find a Bushcrafty folding knife with a decent wood saw attached to it. Does such a pocketable combo even exist, or should I just go with a fixed blade knife and separate foldable saw instead? I mean, I think you should always go with a fixed blade knife for outdoor use, but that's just me. There's a couple options we can talk about. The first is the Boker Optima. This is not going to be an inexpensive option. This one right here is part of a set. It's about $240. You've got, what's the blade here? Is this a 440C? No, it's a 4034 stainless clip point blade, kind of 110 inspired, this design. But this is an exchangeable blade lockbacking knife. Backlockable knife.
Words are hard.
Yes, indeed. Interesting. The spine may be almost crisp enough to throw a spark on this. Might need just a little bit of dressing and be really good. But anyway, normal day-to-day use, operates just like a lockback. Nothing to get surprised about there, but go into the 90-degree position, hold the lockdown, you can actually wiggle that blade right out. And this particular set comes with a saw right there. So you can slide that right back in theory. There we go. Hang on. There we go. Gotta be careful not to push on the teeth right there despite instinct. So there you go. Got a nice little wood saw there. I have seen lockbacks that have a blade and saw combo, but I can't find any recent examples lately. So if anyone out there knows of some, let us know. So this could be an option, but it is not an affordable one. Another option could be less of a bushcrafty vibe, but a great tool nonetheless, the Swiss Army Victorinox one-hand trekker. You've got a one-hand opening blade, and unfortunately they don't make the plain edge version of this anymore. You are going to have some serrations here, but for your bushcrafty tasks, when you're going to be wood carving, at least the heel of the blade is the portion that is plain edge here. So you're going to have an easier time doing your whittling. It is a locking blade, which is nice, and you've also got that excellent pocket-sized wood saw, in addition to some other implements, of course, as well. This one has an awl, a Phillips driver, can opener, and bottle opener as well. Really nice, very comfortable to use. I like the Outrider personally. It's not one-hand opening, but that's kind of my personal choice. If you want something with a little bit more of a bushcrafty vibe, this is a little, I would say this one is a little more expensive. The one-hand trekker there, about $65. This knife is about $121, the Ranger Wood 55 from Victorinox. It is a two-hand opening blade, but you can get it, or it comes in that plain edge version right there. So that's, for me, I would prefer that. It's still lockable, and you still have that nice heavy wood saw there. Same implements otherwise, or scratch that, you don't get the toothpick and tweezers because of the wood handle scales, and they give you the corkscrew rather than the Phillips, which can be handy in an outdoor scenario. I've talked about how this can help untying knots and that sort of thing. And with the wood handle scales, even though you're still dealing with a Swiss Army knife, rather than something strictly kind of vintage feeling or more rustic feeling, I should say, which sometimes goes along with the bushcrafty aesthetic. This is a nice bridge between the two worlds, shall we say. All right, now we come to the lightning round for today. Question comes from Hollow Ground Knigget. I've recently decided to build my own knife. That is awesome. Happy to hear it. I know I can buy G10 slabs and the sort, but does epoxy resin work for handle scales, or do they wear break down too easily? Any information towards solid procedures would be helpful. Yeah, most of the knife makers I know like to use West Systems G-Flex epoxy. Works great for attaching their handle scales. LT Wright, for example, uses that in addition to the pins. That stuff is crazy strong. In fact, one of my other knife making friends was trying to do a new handle on one of his existing knives and trying to rip off the old handle. The epoxy was so dang strong that the micarta actually delaminated and ripped off before the epoxy gave up the ghost. He actually had to heat it up with a flame to kind of break it down and pull the rest of it off. Crazy tough stuff, definitely works really well. I have used it a few times. I've used more often just, I think it's a DEFCON, more of a standard epoxy. Not as strong, but works pretty well also. More widely available too, but use what works. There's all kinds of great epoxies out there to get you started. Once you know you're into the hobby and you want to continue it, you could always invest in the good stuff or the better stuff later. But man, I'm so happy you're making a knife. That is just so cool, so much fun, and I highly encourage all of you to go do this. Which brings us to our last question, our most serious question of the day, which comes from Catfish Cave. Most serious question. Too many mosquitoes in my house that fly around from room to room. I don't want to kill them, so what would be the best knife to cut off their wings so they cannot fly anymore? It's devious.
I presume if you were able to catch them to cut off their wings, then you have a way to contain them.
So he doesn't want to kill them. I guess he doesn't want to contain them either.
Are they free-range mosquitoes?
Yes, they're farm to table. From the farm to the table where they bite you. I guess he just really wants to make them suffer.
Maybe.
Well, something comes to mind, but it's going to require some modification. It's the Benchmade Flyway. But the modification that will be required is typographical in nature. You got to add, after fly, a dash and an A. So it's like an old Acme product, but fly away. So you take away their fly ability. I don't know, that's the best I got.
Didn't exactly float that one, did you?
Whatever. Throw your most serious questions down in the comments, as well as any other actually serious questions that you would like us to consider for a future episode. If you want to get your hands on any of these knives, check out the links in the description, which will take you over to KnifeCenter.com. And always remember, we've got our Knife Rewards program in place so that when you're buying one of these knives today, you get to earn some free money to spend on your next one. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center. That's Thomas behind the camera, and we're signing off. See you next time.
Aren't we just taking off?
We're flying away. See, that's why it doesn't work, does it?